How exactly do you wipe out an invading army of 100,000 without firing a single shot? No bombs, no bullets, no direct fire weapons. This isn't a hypothetical war game or a simulation. It is a high-stakes biological rescue mission on one of the most remote, inhospitable places on Earth, Henderson Island. Often referred to as the crown jewel of global biodiversity, this place is a jagged limestone fortress rising straight out of the South Pacific. But right now, that crown is being systematically dismantled from the inside out. The enemy isn't human. It's a relentless, invasive force of rats that has turned this sanctuary into a biological graveyard. But there is a massive logistical nightmare standing in the way of any rescue. Henderson isn't just a flat patch of sand. It is a jagged, vertical maze of fossilized coral and impenetrable jungle. The terrain is razor-sharp. If you attempt to land a traditional ground force or rely on manual traps, you have already lost the war. It is too large, too hostile, and far too complex for conventional intervention. There is absolutely zero margin for error here. A single tactical misstep, one misplaced drop, or one overlooked burrow won't just mean a failed mission. It will trigger a catastrophic chain reaction of extinction. We are talking about species of birds that exist nowhere else on the planet, facing a literal death sentence if this strike isn't executed with surgical precision. You can't just flood the island with toxins. That would be like leveling the entire forest just to save the trees. To win this war, you have to be smarter. You have to trigger a cascading failure from within the swarm itself. To understand how this unprecedented biological strike unfolds, we first need to look at the target list. To understand why Henderson Island is a logistical fortress, we have to look at the geography. This isn't your typical Pacific paradise with soft sand and swaying palms. It is a raised coral atoll, a jagged fossilized plateau thrust out of the ocean floor, creating a landscape of razor-sharp limestone known as Makatea. Imagine trying to navigate a maze of cracked, hollowed-out stone where every edge is a blade and every hole is a trap. Covering over 37 square kilometers of the most isolated territory on Earth, this island is a natural stronghold. To survive here, the local species developed a delicate, high-stakes balance over millions of years. But that balance is being systematically obliterated. To dismantle the invasive occupation, we first have to identify the 3 critical zones that serve as the heart of this ecosystem. The points where the invading force is most concentrated and where the resistance is most vulnerable. Target 1 is the North Plateau breeding colonies. This is the biological reactor of the invasion. Covering the densest interior jungle of the island, these colonies are where the population generates its massive numbers. We are talking about a reproductive cycle that is nothing short of an assembly line. A single pair of these invaders can produce hundreds of offspring in a single season, creating a constant, surging supply of units to replace those lost to the harsh environment. Taking this sector offline is the primary objective because simply killing individuals at the edges is inefficient. You have to shut down the source. If these breeding hubs remain operational, any strike we make will be countered by a fresh wave of reinforcements within weeks. This is the crown jewel of the rat's grip on the island, and it is situated deep within a canopy so thick that traditional ground surveillance is completely blinded. Target 2. The interior forest arteries. These are the supply lines. While the breeding happens in the hubs, the survival of the swarm depends on a highly predictable network of trails and resource pathways. Rats are creatures of habit. They utilize fixed logistical routes through the leaf litter and limestone crevices to reach the few reliable moisture sources on the island. In an environment where fresh water is a luxury, these trails are the lifelines of the invasion. By mapping these arteries, we can identify the exact points where the swarm is most exposed. We can sever these lines, we trigger an immediate logistical crisis for the enemy force. Without access to these critical resources, the cohesion of the swarm begins to fracture, forcing them out of their fortified burrows and into contested territory where they are far easier to neutralize. Target 3 is the East Beach nesting grounds. This is the most sensitive sector of the battlefield. It is the sole nursery for the Henderson Petrel, a bird that exists nowhere else in the universe. Because these birds evolved in a world without land predators, they have zero defensive instincts. They are soft targets. Every night, the invading force descends upon these nurseries like a precision strike team, targeting the most vulnerable assets, the chicks and the eggs. This isn't just predation, it is a systematic erasure of a species. If we lose Target 3, the entire mission is a failure, regardless of how many invaders we kill. These nurseries represent the domino of the entire ecosystem. The birds are the primary engineers of the island's fertility, bringing nutrients from the vast ocean back to the sterile limestone soil. Without them, the nutrient cycle stops. The trees die. The insects vanish. The entire structure collapses. The window for intervention is closing rapidly. This isn't a slow, decades-long decay. It is a high-speed collision. Based on current attrition rates, we have a 30-day window before the Henderson Petrel population hits a point of no return. Once that threshold is crossed, we trigger a devastating cascading failure across the entire network. It would result in a biological blackout, plunging this vibrant ecosystem into a state of permanent, silent death. Taking the island back requires more than just a massive payload of intervention. It requires a strategy designed for surgical industrial destruction of the invasive population. Because the terrain is too hostile for human feet and the canopy is too dense for simple scouting, the mission requires a drastic new approach. To force the invasion to collapse and reclaim the crown jewel of the South Pacific, the strategy is unfolding in 3 distinct calculated stages. Stage 1 begins before a single asset even touches the ground. This is how we take back the island. Here is exactly how that strike would happen in 3 distinct stages. This is Stage 1, the blindfold. It begins before a single asset even touches the limestone. While the island looks like an impenetrable wall of green from the surface, modern technology allows us to strip away the camouflage. High-altitude drones equipped with advanced infrared sensors and thermal imaging begin systematic sweeps of the island's interior. These sensors are designed to pierce through the thick canopy of the North Plateau, mapping out the thermal signatures hidden beneath the leaves. We aren't just looking for individual rodents. We are looking for the thermal spikes of the breeding colonies. These are the centers of gravity. By pinpointing the exact heat maps of the burrows, we create a high-definition digital twin of the enemy's logistics. Simultaneously, we utilize specialized acoustic sensors to track the communication patterns of the swarm. Rats are highly social, relying on ultrasonic frequencies to alert the collective to danger or food sources. Stage 1 isn't just about watching, it is about sensory deprivation. We identify the alpha individuals, the hubs of the social network, and deploy targeted acoustic interference to drown out their warning signals. We aren't just watching the enemy, we are isolating them. By the end of Stage 1, the swarm is effectively blind and deaf to the coordinated strike about to hit their doorstep. Then comes Stage 2, the penetration. With the battlefield mapped and the communication network suppressed, we move from observation to surgical infiltration. This isn't a carpet bombing campaign. That's inefficient and carries far too much collateral risk for the sensitive bird nurseries. Instead, we utilize a fleet of heavy-lift autonomous drones. These aren't carrying nuclear yields or high-explosive JDAMs. They are carrying heavy payload packages specifically designed for surgical industrial destruction of the invasive population. Logic capsules. These capsules are precision-guided moids, each one threaded through the canopy gaps with GPS accuracy within centimeters. They aren't meant to cause a massive explosion. The goal is to cause catastrophic mechanical failure to the hardest-to-replace component of the invasion, the reproductive cycle. The drones drop these capsules directly into the high-traffic arteries identified in Stage 1. Each capsule contains a highly specialized, non-toxic biological agent, either a targeted hormonal disruptor or a specific microbial interference package. Unlike traditional poison, which is blunt and messy, these logic capsules are designed to unlock, to weave themselves into the very fabric of the swarm's survival strategy. The rats don't see them as a threat, they see them as a resource. They carry the payload back into the deepest, most fortified burrows, effectively delivering the strike from the inside out. We are no longer attacking the island. We are rewriting the swarm's DNA from within. This leads us to the final, most devastating phase. Stage 3, the cascading failure. This is where the dominoes begin to fall. The objective of Stage 3 isn't to level the 37 square kilometer island. That's unnecessary. The goal is to cause a total collapse of the social and biological infrastructure. As the agents from Stage 2 begin to take effect, the reproductive centers of the colony simply cease to function. It doesn't happen with a bang, but with a silent, terrifying absence. Within a single generation, the replacement rate of the swarm drops to 0. But the failure isn't just reproductive, it is structural. In a colony-based society, the burrows and trail networks require constant maintenance. As the population begins to age and thin out without reinforcements, the automated safety systems of the swarm, the collective defense of the burrows, begin to trip. This results in a devastating cascading failure. Without enough workers to maintain the tunnels or enough foragers to secure the lifelines, the entire social hierarchy of the invasion plunges into total darkness. The alphas lose control. The trail networks fall into disrepair. The hardest-to-reach underground labyrinths, once impenetrable fortresses, become death traps. We aren't just killing rats. We are triggering a systemic collapse of their entire occupation. As the pressure from the invasive force drops, the grid frequency of the ecosystem begins to stabilize. The birds in Target 3, the Henderson Petrels, start to see a drop in predation within days. The payload has done its job. By week 4, the massive campaign of infiltration stops, and the momentum shifts entirely in favor of the island's original inhabitants. The crown jewel is no longer being dismantled. It is being restored, one calculated domino at a time. But while the main force is broken, the mission isn't over. This is where the hunting game begins, and the precision of our tools must meet the relentless nature of the survivors. But even after the massive social structure collapses, the hunt begins. We aren't just looking for rodents. We are hunting for missile launchers, the resilient, isolated survivors tucked away in the deepest subterranean labyrinths. If even a single pair manages to restart a colony, the entire domino chain resets. This is why the pressure never drops. Specialists transition into a 24/7 patrol, aggressively monitoring the entirety of the island's airspace and forest floor. It becomes a highly coordinated game of hide-and-seek where the stakes are life and death. So why use 3 radically different tools? The DNA-targeted technology acts as the silent stealth assassin, neutralizing high-value reproductive targets without causing any collateral damage to the ecosystem. The heavy-lift drones act as the flying arsenal, providing the massive payload delivery and strategic coverage over terrain where ground teams simply cannot survive. And finally, the conservation dogs. These are the advanced sensor fusion units. Using their incredible olfactory range, they hunt down the radar signals of the final survivors, pinpointing resistance that even the best infrared cameras miss. It is a perfect tactical synergy: stealth, scale, and surgical precision. The result is nothing short of an ecological miracle. The gray, lifeless shadow of the occupation begins to lift. The vibrant greens of the Henderson forest return, reclaimed from the verge of collapse. The Henderson Petrel, the crown jewel of this habitat, reappears in numbers that haven't been seen in over a century. This is the power of the surgical strike. It proves that true protection doesn't come from the loudest explosion or the most massive ground occupation. Fetches. It comes from the most intelligent and calculated solution. We didn't just save an island, we mastered the battle space of nature itself. If you found this breakdown of strategic conservation fascinating, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into how we solve the world's most impossible problems. Because in the end, the ultimate weapon isn't raw power, it's logic.